Center. It is a true thrill to welcome you to the fourth lecture of our series on art, technology, and activism, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the free speech movement here at UC Berkeley. Yes. As we have been thinking about activist legacies of that era so far, we've had already a variety of models for thinking about what activism looks like. We've heard from J.P. Barlow, the founder of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Grateful Dead lyricist, and heard his potent memories of the FSM movement. We've had Maya Lin's formally precise ecological platforms. We've heard from Brett Cook and his interventions in community public health and social justice in Little Bobby Hutton Park in Oakland, the site of the Black Panther movement's activism also in that era. And 2 weeks from tonight, we'll also welcome Rick Lowe, public artist, innovative architect, recently anointed MacArthur Genius, who will be coming to talk with us further about how an aesthetic imagination can activate an activist sensibility, specifically in the realm of urban reimagining. But today, it is a thrill to welcome Cheryl Haines. Cheryl Haines, I know, as all of you know, is the executive director of the Bay Area's own Foresight Foundation, an innovative powerhouse curatorial platform that supports, produces art about place, and has produced some of the most formative, potent events in the Bay Area, in our region, over the last decade, including recently International Orange at the Golden Gate, on the Golden Gate Bridge, or Andy Goldsworthy and the Presidio. But you are all here tonight because Cheryl Haines decided to do an even more impossible project, curating at large Ai Weiwei's massive installation on Alcatraz Island. When Cheryl and I were talking a few months ago trying to figure out the right date for her to come and speak, we hoped that early November would be a moment when she could take a breath, where she could reflect a bit after all of the negotiating, all of the building, all of the flying back and forth to China and back, and the negotiating and more and more and more, that it would be a time to sort of reflect and think about what hath been wrought on Alcatraz Island. I'm not sure that she had a chance to take that breath. But I know that we're all thrilled that to take a breath ourselves, to think together, for those of us who have been there now, sometimes some of us a few times, to think together about what Ai Weiwei's installation means there. I don't think we could have imagined a more provocative project to set against our investigation of the free speech movement and its legacies, given its urgency and the poignancy with which it responds to issues of censorship and political punishment that still continue today. So it is a thrill and privilege to have Cheryl with us tonight. We hope that she'll have that chance to reflect with us. And I hope you will also join me in welcoming Cheryl Haines to the stage.
It's really an honor for me to be here this evening, and you're right, we haven't had a moment yet. So a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about tonight are really ideas still in formation. There's still a lot of information that we're gathering in terms of the potential ramifications of this conversation on the island. So you'll have to bear with me that things aren't fully cooked as yet, but
we don't want them cooked.
More interesting. Yeah. Earlier tonight, in talking with some folks before the lecture, I realized that a lot of you probably don't know that much about the Foresight Foundation, and I've kind of switched things up a little bit here so I can talk about that just at least briefly to give you a sense of our commitment to place before we launch into other things. So, activism. The policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. Well, I actually feel like I'm speaking to the choir a bit here, but Happy anniversary, by the way. It's very exciting. And I hope you will know that one of the reasons we decided to do this exhibition at this moment in time is we really did want to mark this moment as a really significant one and add to the dialogue around what has happened over the last 50 years. So what I would really like to talk about first is a little bit about the Foresight Foundation, and then give you some examples of some of the artists that we have either worked with in the past or admire for their social practice. So yes, it's true, the Foresight Foundation, very small organization based in San Francisco, at least that's where our office is. We have our Artist in Resident Education program up in the foothills of the Sierras in a place called Nevada City, which is quite a fantastic place. It has a very long history, for California long. The gold rush, there was a strong Native American populace there. And we host one artist a year who does a residency there, and we partner with local institutions to support their project. And we also, every semester, have a group of students. At the moment, it's CCA, and we've been focusing on. So for some reason, we've gotten in the groove with them. We're still interested in Berkeley. And what we do is we bring, we choose an educator every semester, and they bring students to the property, and they engage in a whole investigation around the notion of place, and we bring different experts in that can help direct that investigation. Architects, organic farmers, physicists, pot farmers, Native American practitioners of traditional craft. It's been fantastic. And that's been going on for 11 years now, very quietly. And in 2008, we decided that though these were very worthwhile activities, we didn't really feel as though there was enough of a broad-based public benefit from our work. And we began thinking about how can we take art into the landscape, into the social landscape. There's so many wonderful august institutions in the Bay Area, museums, galleries that are doing remarkable work, but there seemed to be a real niche that was available for us to start activating the landscape. And because there is such a rich natural and social history here in the Bay Area, and there's this remarkable opportunity for people to actually be outside because of our environment, that we thought that there would be an opportunity for us to work. So we started primarily in Presidio, working with the Presidio Trust and the Parks Conservancy and the National Park Service. And over the last number of years, we have realized 4 Indie goals for these works. A 4th one was just completed 2 months ago. I don't know if you make it to that part of the Bay Area, but it's worth doing so. We've done some temporal exhibitions. Presidio Habitats, which was 25 artists, architects, and designers internationally that we asked to design habitat structures for the animal population of the park. That's when we started working with Ai Weiwei, actually. He designed a series of blue and white porcelain screech owl houses. It's kind of hard to think of such a formidable man choosing the smallest, most common and sweet little bird to design for, but it was like the perfect pairing somehow. For the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge, we were asked by the National Park Service to make a proposal, and we did an exhibition in Fort Point, which is the only Civil War fort on the West Coast. And it's an extraordinary place. It's under the South Anchorage, and there again, we commissioned a number of artists to address the history of not only the building of the bridge, but how it changed sort of the cultural and economic environment of the Bay Area when the bridge was completed. And that was our last formal project. While I was standing on the top of the fort, I kept looking out into the bay because it's an incredible view, and my eyes kept resting on Alcatraz. And I kept thinking, now that is a sight. I'll get my hands on that one. That comes later. So to talk just briefly about a few artists that are probably well known to you, but sets the stage a little bit for Ai Weiwei in his form of practice. Fritz Haig, someone who's near and dear to my heart, and in some ways, this is not necessarily a unique concept here in Berkeley, California, but it is in the places that he's been working. He's chosen 16 sort of middle America cities around the United States since 2005 and to do these sort of agricultural interventions, if you will. He's a performance artist, he's a social activist, he's someone that believes that if you can get a community behind a new idea, then that can make social change happen quietly, but also very quickly. So he chose these neighborhoods to work in that had manicured lawns, everything was like magazine perfect, very white in many cases. And he would walk the neighborhoods and he would take like days trying to find a likely suspect. Someone that seemed like they would be friendly, they would be open to sort of a new idea, a new way of thinking, of interacting with their neighbors. And he would find one person that would agree to dig up their front lawn and put in an edible garden. And he said, that wasn't really easy. It really took some doing. I mean, we laugh because we're like, well, my garden is full of pumpkins right now. But he said it was a fascinating sort of sociological study in a way too, just to see if he was right about the people he would choose. But it was also very interesting to him to see how not only did they learn about their own food source and how things could be grown and be sustainable, but it changed the way they interacted with their neighbors. And it caused all kinds of new conversations in the community, and before you knew it, there were other kinds of collaborations happening. And it was an activism in a way that, he started the conversation, but then it took on a life of its own, which I think in many ways is really the best way to go. Someone who is interested in social commentary and in sort of human culture and how we inhabit space in a different way is Stephanie Sujuko. She was one of the artists that we commissioned for the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge project, and her project was the International Orange Commemorative Store, a proposition. And it was fascinating because International Orange, of course, is the color of the bridge, and that was the title of the exhibition, and she decided to riff off of that and involved a very large number of artisans, artists, local organizations like Heath Ceramics to create all of these variety of objects to live in this store, and of course none of them were for sale. It was the most frustrating experience for visitors I've ever seen. We have some great video documentation of this project. And what she was really trying to get to, I think, is sort of a sense of how commerce can sometimes take a hold of an experience. Like someone should be enjoying the exhibition and being with the ideas and looking at the artworks. But instead, you often see people like rushing to the bookstore to buy the catalog. And it completely destroys that moment of intimacy with the experience. But more than that, she's also interested in producers, distributors, and the flow of capital, and how to investigate sort of the issues of economy and the art world. This was the most challenging slide to find of all. I don't know how many of you know the artist Tino Segal, but he's my hero. I love his work so much. One of the most remarkable pieces I've ever experienced is for the 50th anniversary of the Guggenheim, they commissioned Tino Segal, who is a performance artist. He's interested in dance. He's interested in social interaction. He's very curious about how the convention of how people approach one another and communicate in the public space, and how to break that down potentially to create new ways of being with one another. And basically what he did was, it's the first time in the history of the Guggenheim where they emptied every single object out of the spiral, the center of the museum. And what you would do is you would walk into the museum and you would be met at the bottom of the ramp by a small child. I mean, like a small child, like a 5-year-old, and you're looking for their parent, and you're like, this is quite frightening. Why is this child walking up to me? And they would start asking you questions about progress. What is your idea of progress? How do you think about progress? And I had purposely not read the review before I went to the exhibition because I wanted to be surprised. I wanted to be in the moment. And then they would start walking you up the ramp, and then you'd get a little bit further along, and then the child would peel off, and you're like, thank God, there's their parent somewhere. And then an adolescent would come up to you and have the same question and say, so what do you think about progress? Can we talk about progress? And then they'd have some little story to tell you about what their notion of progress was. And then went all the way up to an adult and then an elder person at the top. And by the time you were done with this, you were so utterly undone by what this piece was and what he was trying to accomplish that you had to go down and do it again. At least I did. And everyone started communicating with one another in such an intimate and fresh and unexpected way that it broke down any kind of convention that one would normally feel in a museum. I thought it was fantastic. But he doesn't really allow photography or videography of any of his work. He wants it to be ephemeral. He wants that to be a moment in time. So that's a little harder.
So this is how
I'm actually going to go right onto Alcatraz right now. So, yeah, what a project. One of the questions that people ask when they hear about this project is, why Ai Weiwei and why Alcatraz? And, there are a lot of reasons, really. I think it's not just an ex-federal penitentiary. It's also a site that housed conscientious objectors. It was clearly a site of protest. There was a Native American occupation, as you know, there from 1969 to 1971. It's a very complicated environment there. It has an interesting cultural history, but there's also a natural environment there that is quite compelling as well. And why Ai Weiwei? Well, what better conversation than somebody who's just recently been detained by their beliefs? So I thought I would start by just talking to you about how this project came about, just briefly. So I'd already identified Alcatraz as a site I was really interested in, and it wasn't until almost a year and a half later when I was sitting in Weiwei's studio in Beijing. He'd just been released from detainment, and he was very quiet, very introspective. He didn't seem himself at all because he can be, rather bombastic. He's a very strong personality. He would have to be to continue to bring forth the beliefs that he has. And I said, Weiwei, it's I know you have many friends around the world, and many people are trying to help you, and including Hillary Clinton, who actually went to the Chinese government while he was disappeared to argue for his release. As your friend, is there any small thing I can do to help you? And his response was, you can bring my art to a broader audience. And it wasn't until that moment that I thought, what if I brought you a prison? And he looked at me and he said, yes, I think I would like that very much. So I thought, uh-oh, what have I done? Okay, because I'm not someone who tends to promise something without delivering it, and I knew that this was not going to be easy. So thus began about a year and a half worth of conversation with the National Park Service. It is the most visited site in the national parks system with 1.6 million visitors a year. It's a very complicated environment. When you think about 5,000 people a day, and it's a very small environment, the cultural resource is quite fragile, the natural resource is difficult as well. I knew that we had quite a complex project on our hands. As you can see, I changed my entire talk tonight because I realized I needed to talk to you about foresight a little bit, so I'm going to backtrack just a hair to talk to you a little bit more about some of the people who were incarcerated here that leads up to the Ai Weiwei project. Philip Grosser. Does everybody know who Philip Grosser is? conscientious objector. He was in Alcatraz in June 1919. He was in solitary confinement because he decided he wouldn't want to report for military duty. This is actually one of my favorite photographs of the history of Alcatraz. The Hopi Indians in 1895 were the first prisoners of conscience there because they just decided they really didn't want to send their children to government schools, and they didn't want to change their farming methods to suit the U.S. government. So they were detained for quite some time. And of course, the Native American occupation we've mentioned before. So what I thought I would do is I have a brief video that I wanted to show you on the making of the project, and then I want to go right into sort of the tenets of the work. Are we good with watching our video?
Yeah.
Okay.
This struggle is our internal struggle because we always to fight for the best result we can be satisfied.
Well, I respect the creative struggle that you've been having around this, and I can only imagine that because of the broad ideas and the complexity of the site, it's a very complex place to find yourself, and I have to say I'm thrilled with what you're finding in this process. Ai Weiwei has some amazing ideas for this exhibition, but realizing them has been another matter. In 2011, Ai Weiwei was detained by the Chinese government, and to this day, he is still unable to leave China. So I have had to make many trips to his studio in order to confer with him about this project.
What only requires is our imagination. We have to think about what's that like, which is not bad practice. In that sense, it's a very complicated process. Even the work itself looks very simple, easy, but that's we always want our work looks very simple. Anybody can do it.
It's easy for people to understand the message, and there's one thing that's very important in this project is that people know the political prisoners in all over the world. At the beginning, we did some research about the prisoners and the photographs.
And that was probably a 6 or 7 month process to compile a list of people that we were interested in, that Weiwei wanted to represent in the piece.
And then we divided up into 10 designers and start to pixelate the image, and then go piece by piece and fill in all the Legos.
Each portrait takes up to about 10,000 bricks.
Weiwei comes and looks at it. He's very quick at deciding. It's like, no, good, no, okay, this is fine. And then we move on past that.
So we're trying to make one huge dragon into this space. So really give the energy, So we want to the object itself is feel light, cheerful, full of energy, and a lot of hope, and even with joy, but still reflects the
the clay is really meaningful, and then we use a lot of Chinese pattern and language. So we make the dragon look traditional but modern.
Dragon in the old time classically is symbolic for the emperor and the king. But we use that image to represent personal freedom. But we think everybody has this power.
The profile that we are following is reference to a bird.
How long have you been working on this piece?
This is few months. This is the first idea is come from.
Yeah.
This is totally different from this drawing.
We can work together and then inspire each other, and then we build up something new. So every time I work for Weiwei, and then I think it's so surprised the result, and then you never know before the deadline, and then after that, when you see the result, and then you will feel, whoa, that's great. The effect is.
Till the last moment before we shipped out, we don't really know.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's been very difficult that Ai Weiwei has not been able to come for this installation. But every day, we have 10 studio assistants here. We've been sending photographs to him in his studio in Beijing so that he can see the progress.
At-large had the benefit of three wonderful partners, the Foresight Foundation, the National Park Service, and the Parks Conservancy, and of course, the amazing gift of this world-renowned artist. But when you put all those institutions together to launch something of this significance, unprecedented in many ways, it's complicated. There are many details to work out, there are different points of view, hundreds of meetings, lots of logistics, lots of discussions, so it's been a splendid undertaking, a complicated undertaking, one with difficulties and heated arguments along the way, but in the end, that's art.
Small team, but everybody works at the highest level that's possible for them. And that videographer that went to Beijing with me a couple of times, Jan Sturman, it was amazing he was able to exact that much footage out of the brief amount of time we had with the artist. So just to talk about the exhibition tenets for the moment, so if I had to really distill it to 4 basic ideas, I would have to say it's about what is the concept of freedom, the importance of human rights and freedom of expression, what we can do increasingly as global citizens to ensure the continuation of that conversation, and the importance of the role of communication in helping create a just society. These are all things that Weiwei is very interested in and has been very involved with for the number of years. I mean, he's not just a visual artist, he's also I don't even know how to term to use, some technology people can help me with this, but he's like a social entrepreneur. He's he trades in communication. I mean, he knows so well on how important it is to be able to share ideas as quickly and as broad-based as possible. This project wouldn't have been possible without those communication tools. It's true I went to Beijing 6 times to visit with him, and we took 3D models, architectural drawings, renderings, photographs, films, historic books. But I would say really the Skype calls and the constant communication on the internet on a daily basis is really what made this possible, this project. So I've only chosen a couple of works to talk about because it would be quite a lengthy conversation if I talked about all of them. And so I've chosen 3 works. The first one is entitled Trace, and it is comprised of 1.2 million Legos, and it depicts 176 prisoners of conscience that are either have been historically or currently being held in detainment around the world. We work very closely with Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch to vet these people's background very carefully, because it was important to us that these people, there was no violence associated with their act, and that these were merely expressions of personal belief and practice. So Weiwei made the final selections of all the individual portraits and designed the templates for these works. It was 2,700 pages of digital templates that we actually had to, most of which we had to make here. We had over 100 volunteers that were working in the Palace of Fine Arts for 4 weeks, assembling these portraits. Some of the Tibetan and Chinese portraits were done in Beijing, but everything else was done here. You know, why Lego? For Weiwei, I think there are a couple of reasons. One of them is, first of all, there was only a singular photograph we could find online of most of these prisoners of conscience, and they were of a very poor quality. So he wanted to depict that accurately. Secondly, I think the fact that it's a replication of these similar components, it speaks about our commonality in the human condition. And thirdly, and I think most importantly, is the fact that to Weiwei, the next generation is really our hope. It's so important that children and young people are exposed to these ideas. And what better way to expose them to actually use material that they're comfortable with and respond well to, and will welcome them into the conversation. And I'm happy to report that the visitor response to this work has been overwhelming. It's been so exciting to see not just the art tourist, but the regular visitor to the island that may not even be aware that this exhibition exists there, interacting with these works and asking questions. And one of the things we did that was, I felt so poignant around this project, is we insisted on installing Wi-Fi on the island for the first time. And our partners, Brown Pelican, donated $250,000 worth of Wi-Fi so that the visitors could have access not only to social media, and so they could tweet and they could Instagram and communicate with their friends, but also so they could go online and they could do greater research around these individuals. Because on our website we have quite a bit of material around each single prisoner of conscience that's depicted in this project. There are very big issues that these artists are addressing here, but I think that not until these issues are distilled and represented by the human face, and in the case of Stay Tuned, the human voice, do they really start to become things that we can sort of digest as individuals. It was so surprising to me how few, I mean, I've been involved with human rights issues for many years. I've been involved with particularly Tibetan human rights for almost 30 years. And it was so surprising to me how few of these individuals I recognized, and that has been pretty much of a universal conversation with people. So we installed this work in the New Industries building, which is where the privileged prisoners would work under the direction of the guards. And the space I'm showing you right now is called the Gun Gallery. And they would walk in this elevated space looking down on the prisoners while they were working. And it was a very interesting sort of hierarchy. And when you go as a visitor to this project, you're asked to go and walk through the gun gallery so that you can look down on these prisoners of conscience and get a sense of what it was like to actually have been a prisoner there. There's such a huge variety of people depicted in this project. I mean, one of the points I do want to make is that I would say 95% of them are prisoners of conscience currently. There's another 3 or 4% that are historic figures that are incredibly important and need to be honored in this project. And then there is the position of the artist to be considered. And his point is that, you know, yes, this is about human rights, but this is about activism, but this is also art. And it's an opportunity for the artists to encourage dialogue. And I have to say, it was very interesting having Edward Snowden show up maybe 2 days before we were opening to be inserted in the installation. It was kind of a surprise. But I was really thrilled with how the National Park Service and our partners addressed it, because it is a polarizing conversation. But I'm really proud of them for welcoming it. And I have to go so far as even saying I don't know of another government that would really host an exhibition of this nature of controversy without a question. It was really amazing. I was very proud of them. It really could have been much differently handled. So talking about the faces I didn't know, the Sukja family, a very sad story actually. There was a mother and two daughters. They were South Korean citizens. They moved to North Korea for her husband to get a job working as an economist and to have her hepatitis treated. He was sent outside the country to do some work. He decided to file for asylum because part of the work that he was asked to do was to bring expat North Korean citizens back to stand trial, and he refused to do it. And as a result of it, his wife and two daughters were put in a political prison. And this was in 1985, I believe, and she has since passed away, and the two daughters are still detained. There are so many stories around this project that I can't even begin to tell you, but if you do see the project or you do want to go online and do some research, I mean, it's really, it's quite remarkable what's going on in the world. So Alcatraz was a silent prison for a number of years, and a lot of the inmates weren't allowed to speak to one another, and they would go to great lengths to try to do so. They would remove the water from the pipes, they would try to communicate through the plumbing, they would leave postcards and library books in order to communicate. And in working on this particular aspect of the project, I realized that there's a real similarity and parallel between the members of a repressive nation and prisoners, essentially, is the very first thing that happens is your ability to communicate with the other members of the populace is removed instantly. That's the first thing that happens, whether it's the internet being censored, or whether it's you're not allowed to talk to your fellow in your next cell. And how interesting and important the human voice is in terms of communicating our feelings and our thoughts and ideas. So what we did here is we took 12 cells in cell block A, which is the oldest part of the prison. It was when it was a military prison, pre-federal penitentiary. And Weiwei chose 12 individuals who either created these audio works while they were in detainment or as a result of being detained. And I would just want to play excerpts of a few of them for you because they're absolutely haunting, and they range everywhere from Lolo, who is a contemporary singer in Tibet that has been disappeared for many years, to Pussy Riot, and everything in between. So we'll just listen for a second to Lolo. One of the things that's very courageous in my mind about Weiwei's position in this exhibition is that he's also taken on some very challenging parts of the conversation regarding human rights, and he is drawing a parallel between the Native Americans and how they were treated by the US government and Tibet and China. And as whether you're a dissident, an artist, or just a regular citizen in China, you don't talk about Tibet. It's really not done. And we had a long conversation before we started this project to make sure he was comfortable with it. And Tibet's featured heavily in 4 projects out of 7, which is amazing. Victor Jara.
Ni cosa que se parezca, mi canto de los andarios, para alcanzar las estrellas, que el canto tiene sentido cuando palpiten las venas. Del que morirá cantando las verdades verdaderas, no las lisonjas fugaces, ni las famas extranjeras.
And lastly, Pussy Riot. Okay, I think you got it. So when you do an exhibition like this, particularly in a public site like Alcatraz, when really the vast majority are regular tourists from around the world, you really don't have any sense at all that anything will connect. We do have art guides. We have 47 art guides that we hired there. We have access to the internet. We do everything possible to make people feel comfortable approaching the work, because the whole point of it, back to the beginning of the story with Weiwei, is that he really wanted a wider audience. The art world can be so insular. You know, we can have such a self-referential conversation sometimes. And I mean, that's one of the things I love about our social practice at Foresight, is that we purposely go out into the world and environment and try to activate new conversations with people who may not know anything about what we're doing. So he thought it would be very exciting to create the purest form of activism of this exhibition, which is the very last piece that you encounter is in the dining hall. And this is where a lot of the prisoners would pass notes to each other. This is a very, very dangerous room, but it was also the most social room. So the notion was to place a situation where there were postcards that carried 30 images of the 30 birds and flowers of the most repressive nations around the world. And on the reverse would be the names and addresses of the prisoners of conscience in all of those countries that we've addressed in the rest of the exhibition. And we'd encourage people to write to them. And I can't tell you how moved I am by this part of the project. And we have collected 20,000 postcards in the last 4 weeks. And it's not just, I mean, it's children, it's visitors from all over the world writing amazing things. Can you read that?
Yes.
It's just so deeply touching. I mean, every time I'm out there, the tables are filled with, 24 people writing postcards. And I also brought a few I wanted to read to you, because these just came in today, and I won't give you the background of the individual prisoners, but I think the sentiment is so wonderful. Nobody on this planet should have to endure torture. I know you experienced only prison for the past 14 years, but around you the world is changing very quickly. Perhaps it will change quickly enough to free you or to free the minds of your and my children. Thank you for your courage, both in assuring greater military transparency. This is to Chelsea Manning, by the way. Greater military transparency and showing that bravery can also be in true self-expression. I'm sorry that our country has persecuted for your courage. I should show you this. This is from a 4-year-old. His name is Manuel, and it says, Manuel is 4 years old. He heard your story and wanted to draw you 3 mushrooms growing out of the soil. Your image in the Ai Weiwei exhibition inspires us to treasure freedom. We will support Amnesty International in its effort to protect and free you. Do you mind if I read a few more? No. I just love them. The only thing necessary for evil to exist in the world is for good men to stand by and do nothing. But you did something, and for that you will never be forgotten. Birds are symbols of freedom. Your willingness to have your wings clipped is a sacrifice, and it let the rest of us fly. Thank you. There's another bird one. Someday we will all be able to speak as freely as the birds sing. This is going to a prisoner in Bahrain. You will never be forgot by me. It's got to be a child, right? Anyway, there was one more I wanted to find here. Prisons are built to hold bodies, but walls and bars and locks can't hold a mind. Your mind is your own. I picked this card as I have a peacock named Rosa. It's got a peacock on the front of it. This is going to India, national bird. I have a peacock named Rosa who wanders on my farm daily. Look ahead and stay strong. We all see the same sun rise and fall and rise again. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. I was in prison in the USA in 1961 in the civil rights movement. We sang that song for ourselves and for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheryl is willing to take a few questions, I'm sure, or reflections. I'm sure we have them. Here in the center there.
I have a quick question. Will these postcards go to the prisoners?
Yes, we're working. I'm sorry. We're working
Will they go to the prisoners?
We're working very closely with Amnesty International because they have representatives on the ground in a lot of these locations, and we're going to do our best. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to try to take even a further sabbatical from the gallery to go visit a few of these prisons and actually sit down and have conversations with people. It's pretty important that we see. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that they will all get delivered, but we have to do what we can to see that at least some of them will be.
Cheryl?
Yeah.
Hi. So, the government of China has confined him physically, and yet they allowed this, and they allowed you to visit. On some level, it's confusing. It's a sort of confusing message, and so I wonder what your experience was like dealing with the Chinese authorities, and if you ever felt like they were just going to shut the whole operation down.
All I can say is it's China. It's very confusing. No. No, it's a very complex place, and a lot of times things are not linear. I've been going there since 2006, quite frequently, mostly visiting artists, and it's not always logical, and it's not always linear. And one day the police are in the studio questioning him, and the next day they're bringing him flowers and fish. I don't know what to say, you know, it's really, you know, I haven't had any personal difficulties. We did actually get followed a few times. I've had some computer problems there that seem a little bit unusual, but I don't think they really knew fully what was the content of the show. And even if they did, I don't think they would have prevented it. You know, his show's all over the world. He's got 4 shows that just opened, you know, in September alone in different parts of the world.
Is it just a quick follow-up?
Do you think they really are, they don't care about the international audience? They're doing this to appeal, to show the China that they can find him? And those people don't know what's going on in Alcatraz?
Oh, I don't think they know what's going on in Alcatraz. Probably not. I mean, well, it's hard to say though. I did get interviewed by CCTV, so I don't know if it was aired or not. Hard to say.
It's very moving to see the work reach the deepest levels of conscience and compassion. But I also want to bring up a topic about money, which is so different from the subject of the show. And I just wonder how you handle the fact that everything that Ai Weiwei touches becomes very valuable. And you produce, for example, these aluminum chairs that are really wonderful, but they're clearly going to become a collectible item, and in a way that the value generation there is opposed to the substance of the show. And you must have applied a lot of judgment to figure out how that works out.
You know, we didn't really consider that at all. I mean, the way the Foresight Foundation functions is that we commission these new works, and the work remains the property of the artist. I mean, if he wants to loan them for other exhibitions, which I think is somewhat unlikely in this case because these are all 7 brand new commissioned installations that are very highly site-specific. Yes, the stools could become objects in and of themselves, perhaps, but so that's really not part. The only conversation around finances was raising enough to make this project happen. That was really the main issue.
How much did it cost?
$4 million.
So, thank you. In regards to the embeddedness of the work in the place, I'm interested how that played out. You talked about it a little bit, but could you say more that he wasn't able to come? And do you feel like pieces got dropped away that might have happened if he had been, or was there an advantage actually to being at a distance?
Oh, it's hard to know, really. I know that we provided him with an excruciating detail in every possible location, and over the period of the exhibition, I'm really honored that we developed a really fine collaborative language with one another, and it's not so difficult to communicate the physical characteristics of a place, but the emotive ones are far more challenging. And that was where he trusted me, which I'm very honored by, because the sound works and a few of the other things that were really impossible to communicate. But we've known each other for a long time, and we work well. So.
I have 2 questions that are not totally related. One is I was curious whether the prisoners
To whom the postcards are addressed to, whether they can write back, and whether you knew anything about their situation in terms of their freedom to write letters. And the second question I had was, I'm curious what you think about the intersection of art and activism. I think, and I'm curious whether you and Ai Weiwei talked about that.
First part, you know, we have no idea if they'll be able to write back or not. My guess is probably not. But each case, I'm sure, is quite different than the next. And as far as art and activism is concerned, I mean, when asked that question, he normally responds that, well, my activism, my social media, my art practice, my cats, my family, my breakfast, they're all the same. It's just everything, I mean, he just has this amazingly kind of seamless life. You know, he lives very simply. He has tremendous demands on him at all times, and he places an equal value. he spends every afternoon with his son. He'll leave somebody with the Havel Peace Award waiting in his studio for 3 hours because he's at the park with his son. It's great. You know, he's an interesting value system.
I'm interested in just how you operate as an organization, because I feel that so much of what you had said from your starting point with the 4 points that Ai Weiwei was really concerned with was communication and being a global citizen and sort of leveraging your voice to sort of help bring light to individuals who are struggling for justice. And I see so much of what your organization is doing as being so completely collaborative that it's hard for me to see how Ai Weiwei can be associated with the project in terms of being recognized as an artist, but your organization and yourself not being sort of seen in that same way, especially when you just briefly mentioned that you were essentially the eyes, the ears, and the hands of Ai Weiwei in this sort of setting, and you were the one who sort of proposed the project in the first place. Mm-hmm. So how do you see your sort of relationship in that sort of network? And I'm just more curious to hear about that.
Purely in a supportive role. I mean, I think any good curator is, will do whatever they can to make the artist's wishes and voice heard in the most powerful way possible.
I'm just very curious about all the writing that came out of this, emanated from this. And he wanted to have broad reach. Have you, 20,000 responses in 4 weeks is amazing. What's been the response from the artist?
He's thrilled. I mean, he basically has told me that he thinks this is the most impactful project of his life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to Beijing in 2 weeks to see him. I haven't seen him since the opening. And my proposal to him would be, we want to do a book just around yours truly. It's so moving. I mean, every time I go out there, I see somebody like in tears writing at the table. And it's far more successful, I think, than we had thought it could be. Do you have a question?
I really appreciated your comment about the importance of the way in which he frames Tibet and Native American issues in this. And I wondered if there's anything more you might want to say about the Native American, have there been particular Native American responses to this? Because it seems to me it's really an important thing, because otherwise it can lead to this sort of U.S. othering. And there's so much of our own human rights abuses we haven't dealt with here. And it really, I think the exhibit really brings forward that aspect of the history of Alcatraz and our own location here. So I just would be really interested to hear anything you might elaborate on about the reception of that.
Well, there are two things. One of them is that when we were, there's a specific piece I didn't talk about here, because it was my strategy is not to show you everything. I have to go. Just the things that were most connected to this conversation. There's a piece that's in the 2 psychiatric observation cells that exist there, and in one side is a Hopi Indian song being performed, and the other is the Namgyal monks. And we had to get permission from some of the Hopi elders we got the recording from the Smithsonian Institute Airwaves collection, I believe it is. But they wanted us to further talk to the Hopi elders about the use of it there. And at first they were like, well, there's just sound in the room. Are you hanging pictures on the wall? How's it working? It took us a long time to sort of like walk them through what the project was. But as soon as they understood we were honoring them, they were so thrilled and so excited. And they sent us a letter, of appreciation. And we just got an email a couple weeks ago saying, we want you to extend the exhibition because we have a number of people from the occupation. There's a big anniversary coming up. We're bringing a group. We want you to extend the exhibition for us. Okay, we'll see. So I think it's been very positive.
One of my favorite pieces in the exhibition are the flowers.
Would you talk about Wei Wei's idea and concept between the porcelain flowers?
Well, there are a number of different things there. I would say one of them is, comparing the blossoms, it's called, with then also Stay Tuned, which are the audio pieces, is thinking about what does someone do while they're incarcerated to provide self-comfort? And because he did talk about that a lot. He said that he did experience a fair amount of psychological stress surrounding a situation, and that he was constantly looking for tools for sort of internal support. So he really liked the notion of putting these very beautiful white fragile porcelain flowers in these plumbing fixtures. And I mean, the juxtaposition is strange in a way, but because of their fragility, because of their ephemerality, and this is a place of healing in the hospital, he thought that that would be kind of an interesting conversation. He was also referencing, ever since he was released from detainment, he has a bicycle that he placed in front of his studio, and he puts fresh flowers in the bicycle every day, and will do so until he's able to get his passport back. And where he got the bike was from a German journalist who was arrested for no apparent reason as well, and was forced to leave the country, so he gave Ai Weiwei his bike. And so there's a connection to that. There's also a connection to the 1953 flowers, revolution in China, and also the reinvigoration of craft. It's a longer conversation. I mean, there's a lot of layers to that particular piece, but how Weiwei is known for the reinvigoration of traditional craft in his country. The 100 million sunflower seeds, for example, that were done for the Tate Modern, he was able to reinvigorate an entire region, an old imperial kiln town, by making that piece. He went back to the same practitioners and employed them to do these works as well. Hope that helps a little.
I'm curious, you said we just talked about the Native American, but we also, that sort of background, but also how you thought about the experience of you get there and all these people, you're with all these people, and they're going to see the prison, they're going to see Alcatraz, they're going to see the Birdman cell, and you're offered, of course, the earphone guide that's wonderful. And next to that, you've just been in a room, listening to the Buddhist monks, you're doing this, and then you get this other experience, and that's part of it. And I wonder what you thought about that crevice between this art project and this prison cell sort of earphone guide performance, and what that, and was that part of how you thought about this whole experience?
Well, I have to admit, when we first proposed this idea, that was one of the most challenging aspects, because they do have an award-winning audio tour there, and the visitor engagement people are, they're very specific about, the experience on the island, and they should be. They do a great job with it. So it was challenging to find areas of the island to activate that could be a separate experience, but then when visitors, also then went into the main cell house, that they would be able to interact with the art, but also not interfere with the audio tour. It was one of the harder aspects of the project.
Yeah, I thought it was done brilliantly, and I also felt like there was an interference that you ran with that sort of performance of the prison. That for me, this is just personal, just relieved the imprisonment. Somehow the art worked differently. Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you. I'll think about that. Thank you.
I'm curious if you can, if you can say a little more about the technological aspects. I mean, Ai Weiwei uses Twitter and social media in really interesting ways, and you mentioned the Wi-Fi. Can you say more about the technology and what role that might have played?
Well, just simply, we thought it would be really important that people be able to share their experience with one another, and because he is such a strong social media user, and he has so many followers, and that it could become quite viral quickly if that were in place, and it has, actually. It's been really interesting to see the activity that's been occurring. But we also felt that we wanted to give the general visitor an opportunity to do a little more research if they were like, what is this thing? We want to know, what's happening and who are these people? And so we made it as user-friendly as we possibly could. And I think also going back to Wei Wei's earlier comment about the next generation is so important to this conversation. I mean, those of us who lived through the 60s, we have continued in developing our practice around how important this is in our lives. But, the younger generation really needs to have access to these ideas in their own way of understanding.
I sort of felt as I was walking through the exhibit the first time that the viewers were actually the installation, or part of the installation, and that you take a guy who was sort of confined to his home, world away, and through art he's able to actually pluck us up in San Francisco and have us walking. I heard originally the Legos were supposed to be something that people walked on, so in that case it would have even been guiding each step we took from a world away. And I thought, to me, that was sort of the message of the thing, was the power of art to have a big impact on people a world away, and then maybe the other prisoners of conscience would feel that they had the same impact on people. And I wonder if that was at all part of the goal.
It wasn't verbalized as such, so I can't speak for him on that.
So I would love to tell my students about this exposition, but is there like any free day or special fee for students or underrepresented minorities or something? To make it more accessible.
Yeah, the Parks Conservancy, actually, if you contact them, they have, I think, 4,000 tickets for students that perhaps couldn't afford to go to the island otherwise. They're doing a really great job at making that possible.
Okay, well, great.
Yeah.